Maybe this is a silly question, but let me ask it anyway. Lots of kids are raised by single moms and seem to do okay. So, is a dad really necessary? Early feminists told us that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. But what about kids? Do families really need a father? And if so, why? Let's start with the question of rules and authority. In other videos, we discussed the vital role of boundaries, the implementation of laws and limits. As was true at creation, humans continue to be obligated to submit to boundaries, prohibitions not necessarily to their liking. Yet, as the warning in Genesis taught us, submission to proper authority holds the promise of life. Such an external force may appear as a natural physical limitation, a boundary as to what is possible as well as what ought not to be pursued. It only took one sprained ankle to tell me not to jump off the roof again. Appropriate limits to constrain our desires may also appear as legal, moral, or spiritual law, or the weight of tradition, custom, or taboo. To be effective, each of these should not be perceived as arbitrary but should make sense. Consider the traditional authority of the father. Do not his larger size, stronger arms, and deeper voice imply some differentiated role or power? When such a man is also kind and involved, a natural assumption of authority becomes a sensible fit within the family structure. Yet, for many, the very idea of male authority brings revulsion. One wonders what kind of destructive or neglectful experience the protesters of patriarchy must have accumulated. Of course, we understand that when authority is abusive, resistance will follow. But decades of anti-male rhetoric have so infiltrated the public sphere that many boys and men have come to assume they are not important. They shrink from responsibility and do not pursue leadership roles. They are, as psychologist Helen Smith puts it, on strike. As males refuse to grow up, our culture will rapidly become fatherless. There can be no doubt if a society fails to develop mature men and celebrate fathers, it will not survive. Researcher Chana Ullman, citing multiple studies on the father's role in child development, notes that social adjustment, academic performance, identity and sex role adaptation in both boys and girls are facilitated when fathers exhibit warm involvement in their kids' lives. Summarizing, she highlights 3 key areas. First, insofar as he tends to be perceived by the child as the stronger adult figure, the father endows laws and constraints with authority, inhibiting impulses and imposing a meaningful structure on behavior. Second, as the traditional mediator between the family and the outside world, he promises protection from external dangers, assuring the child of her or his own individual ability to cope with them. Third, as a different significant other within the family orbit, the father offers a necessary counterpart to the mother-infant relationship, aiding the differentiation of the separate sense of self. A father protects the innocence of his daughters. Potential suitors must face his scrutiny, whether they approach through the front door or the portals of the internet. A father works to provide for his family, inviting them to feel taken care of. Traditionally, fathers would teach their children, training them in mental and moral knowledge. Today, men too often are considered to be ignorant or bad or both. I recall venturing into a television program aimed at children. Within the first minute after clicking the station, I was greeted with a scene in which a bright 12-year-old asked her dad what she should do. He simply made a foolish shrug and said something like, "I'm sure you will figure it out, honey. You always do." But a wise dad models ethical, moral behavior. Too often the media typically portrays him as self-centered and lawless and passive. A father channels his sexual drive, inseminating only a future mother. A father represents and enacts positive initiative, pro-social assertiveness, loving leadership. In the 21st century, masculine initiative is maligned and assumed to be toxic. A father models maturity, thoughtfulness, and self-control. Too often we find ourselves surrounded by grown-ups who have not grown up. Respect, obedience, and duty. Acceptance of wise authority facilitates adjustment to reality. For example, a dad enforces simple customs requiring children to show respect to elders. Such customs match the reality they live with every day, namely, that they are small, ignorant, immature, and dependent, and in need of love, guidance, and discipline. When traditions correspond to this kind of immediate physical reality, children feel secure. They are not compelled to create their own sense of right and wrong or determine for themselves who they are. On the other hand, when teachers inform young children that their parents merely guessed at their gender, the authority of mom and dad, and the wisdom of their own body become suspect. Traditionally, each child knows his or her place at the table as well as what chores are required. Privileges are contingent on the performance of those duties. When mother says you wash your hands before coming to the table, that's what you do. Why? Because you're only a child. You don't need to understand everything about germs before obeying. The hunger, of course, is real. It is painful to delay. Yet such frustration fosters maturity and self-control. As children develop self-control, they grow in emotional health, classically defined as psychological adjustment to reality. Kids who develop self-control are less likely to be swayed by social media or peer pressure. In addition, clear house rules also promote well-being. These include clear expectations and consequences. Fair discipline for misdeeds facilitates a growing conscience. The father enforces the rules. When he is respected by the mother and exhibits kindness, children are likely to internalize values and ideals that will guide them for a lifetime. When the father is perceived as the spiritual leader, he represents a bridge of authority and care between the concerns of daily living and the ultimate unseen world. In many families, the father leads in prayer before meals, or he may ask one of the children to say the prayer. From early years, children who are taught to pray experience peace as they learn to see themselves in relation to spiritual realities. In prayer, they can form an image of a benign, yet powerful deity who watches over them while at the same time reigns as sovereign over all reality. When the father pulls out the family Bible, he sends an additional invitation to the children to know deep security. Bible reading is a ritual that invites reflection and linkage with the past, with models of courage and conflict resolution, as well as a sense of belonging. As children listen to Bible stories, they are invited to see their lives as unfolding within a grand sweep of history and the Creator's care. In the final analysis, as a dad teaches the precepts of the Bible, he represents the loving, steady wisdom of the Heavenly Father himself. For more on the importance of authority and the roles and obligation of fathers, check out the book, Sex and Society, God's Design, Tradition, and the Pursuit of Happiness.